Welcome to Multi-Tree Intensive Exam Preparation. All right, in today's webinar, we're going to cover 2 hours of revision. All right, the first hour I'll be going through tax planning, and then the second hour I'll be going through estate planning. Okay, sometimes a webinar may stretch beyond 2 hours. So if you need to go within that time frame, it's okay. You can just log out of the webinar, and then later when you come back, you can just download the videos and review the things that you've missed out. All right, all these videos will be uploaded to the server. You can just download it from the link given to you after the webinar. All right. So today we are going to cover this intensive exam prep. Okay, you have about 2 weeks to examination, so we just want to get you well prepared for that. So today's seminar will be basically on walkthrough on a chapter by chapter basis, similar to what I always do in Module 1. Okay, so if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. No agenda in today's webinar. All right, and then later on, we're going to cover the second webinar, which is another week's time. All right, in that webinar, we'll be doing exam preparation by doing practice exam papers that you already have. I'll be also giving some extra practice questions. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so like I mentioned today, we're going to cover chapter 1 to 5 in the first part, and then later on, chapter 6 to 12, which is estate planning, on the second part of today's webinar. And then I'll leave some time behind for Q&A. But of course, if there's any questions you want to clarify, you can just type in your questions onto the chat box and I'll be able to answer them. All right. Now, let's start with part 1, talking about tax planning. Okay. First thing we must understand is the Income Tax Act, right? Because everything in tax planning boils down to the Income Tax Act. All right, so we need to talk about the context of ITA, which is something we have covered in the first chapter of Module 3. So there are altogether 6 Ws that we need to know, as well as 3 hows, all right, the purpose of tax planning. Okay, so the first W has to do with the why. Okay, why pay tax? Okay, if you remembered, we have covered in Module 1 and also in Module 4 about economic structures. Government implement fiscal policies in order to raise revenue, or sometimes as a contractionary kind of strategy to take money away from the consumers to lower down the inflation. All right, that's one of the objectives. So we pay tax because government need to collect revenue for nation building and to also fulfill certain socio-economic objectives. So for example, in the recent Budget 2015 announcements, all right, we have seen the government giving us a quote Robin Hood kind of budget. Okay, and really that increases their spending. So they have also said that because of that increased spending, okay, the budget becomes a deficit and they have to raise extra revenue by taxing, all right, the higher income earners. So the higher income bracket from 20% tax rate increased to 22%. Okay, they also want to fulfill socio-economic objectives. So for example, the government wants to encourage us to have more babies, increase childbirth. What they can do is they give us some reliefs in the form of, for example, your qualifying child relief, handicapped child relief, working mother's child relief, foreign maid reliefs, and then also your parenthood tax rebate, things like that, to encourage us to have more babies by giving us some reliefs and rebates to lower our tax. Okay, so that's the reason why we pay tax. And then the second W is who pays tax in Singapore. Okay, and this is a very important question. All right, because in the context of ITA, they talk about persons, but a person in the context of the Act is not an individual. All right, it can be an individual, it can also be a company or corporation incorporated in Singapore or overseas. Okay, so the question of who is the subject matter or who is the person paying tax is a very important consideration because different rules and regulations will apply to different contexts of persons. All right. The third W is what is taxed. Okay, so this brings us back into the context of capital, all right, and income or revenue. All right. So basically, we must remember that capital is not taxable in Singapore. Okay. However, income or revenue is taxed in Singapore. And specifically because of that, we must be able to differentiate, all right, what is a capital gain or what is a gain income in nature. And to do that, we must be able to apply different forms of test, all right, in order to identify it. Okay, of course, some of the income or capital is not so straightforward in nature, but some is just a matter of fact. Okay, so we're going to cover that as well later on in Singapore because income is taxable, so we need to know, okay, why is it? All right, the fourth W is where is the source of income coming in? All right, the source means where is the income derived or generated. Okay, in Singapore, we follow a territorial tax basis. So basically, income that is sourced or derived in Singapore is taxable, and foreign income remitted to Singapore for individuals are exempted from income tax. Okay, same thing for foreign individuals, but however, the regulation is different for companies. So the sourcing is important, all right, because if you are individual and you have income being remitted from overseas into Singapore as a result of, let's say, for example, your trade or your gains, all right, from an investment overseas, that is exempted from income tax. But it's a totally different thing if you are a company. Okay, so again, the context is important. Where is the income sourced? All right. The fifth W talks about the basis period of taxation. Okay, so for non-tradable income, okay, it always follows the calendar year, 1st January to 31st December of the year. But for tradable income, it always follows the financial year of the company or the proprietorship. Okay, so again, we must be able to differentiate basis period and know how to calculate the basis period. I think that will be a very common examination topic in Module 3. Okay, and the 6W talks about which types of income are taxable. Okay, we need to identify in Income Tax Act, Section 10-1A all the way down to Section 10-1G income. All right, so from trade income to employment income and so on. Okay, because different types of income also has different types of treatment. Okay, so the 6Ws opens up the context of Income Tax Act, and that basically covers the first 3 chapters of our Module 3. Okay, so in subsequent slides, I'll be going through the different types of calculation theories again, just to walk through. Okay, now, what is the purpose of tax planning? All right, as we have covered earlier, that also has to do with why pay taxes. Okay, so basically, as we know, the purpose of tax planning is to enable us or to help us minimize the tax payable so that we can free up more cash for wealth accumulation. All right, but the context of tax planning has to be the legal context. Okay, so basically we mean about tax minimization strategies or tax planning strategies instead of tax evasion. All right, one is legal, the other one is illegal. Okay, so out of the 3 house, the first house talks about how is tax computed. So basically we must be able to understand the tax framework. Okay, how are the statutory income, your assessable income, your chargeable income derived, all right, in the context of companies, how do you carry or forward or defer, okay, trade losses and so on. Okay, the second how has to do with how much to pay. All right, this is where you need to know how to calculate your taxation. So if you understand the whole tax framework, this should be easy for you, except you need to understand the reliefs, how to apply them, what are the criteria, as well as to memorize the numbers. Okay, the unfortunate thing in Module 3 is that the relief table is not given to you, so you have to memorize it. So in fact, in Module 1 to 5, no relief table is given. The only thing given to you is the tax rate table. Okay, but like I always say, for the exam, just do it for the sake of passing the exam, and then after that, forget about it. Okay, because in practice, we all use our Master Tax Guide, okay, as the basis for helping our clients compute for taxation. Okay, and of course, the third how is how to pay lesser tax. Okay, and that really is the purpose of tax planning. You want to minimize the tax payable so that you can free up more cash. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is the things that we have covered, all right, in the first 3 chapters. Okay, and subsequently, I'm going to cover company taxation, GSTs, and so on in the later part of this webinar. But right now, I just want to go through some of the calculation context in terms of deductions, reliefs, and so on. So I'll be getting away from the slide for a while. I'll be using a screen sharing mode. Okay, so